Hi, my name's Dee. I'm the founder of Mint, and I'm joined again today by Zoe, who's a nutritional therapist. Today we're going to be covering part 2 of hormones in men, and specifically today we're going to be talking about the effect of diet, the two major hormones that could potentially be out of balance, and also what happens when there's too much estrogen in men. So Zoe, can you tell us a bit more about what are the biggest factors that cause hormone problems in men?
Yes, well, there's many factors, and we'll be chatting about them all today, certainly the major ones. It's critical that people realise that it isn't just diet and lifestyle that can play into hormone problems. So if you feel by looking at these videos that you recognise any of the symptoms, then it's really important that you get medically checked, because there are medical conditions that can cause either an over-secretion or an under-secretion of hormones that need to be medically identified and medically addressed. So it's really important that I reinforce that, I think, at the beginning. But as long as you've been to the doctor and they say, yeah, no, there's nothing really medically that we need to look at, then obviously we look at diet and lifestyle factors that can massively play into either overproduction or underproduction of hormones. So first of all, let's look at food. It's obviously our fuel for the body and is essential for the good hormone production. And we looked at, in our basic hormone guide, our first interview, at the importance of cholesterol and how cholesterol is the mother raw material by which all of your sex hormones are made. So, our bodies produce cholesterol, and some of that we also get from our diet. And basically what tends to happen is our body kind of modifies that usually naturally. So if we eat too little, our bodies just produce more. And if we eat too much, our bodies produce less. So it should be nicely in balance for our own body's requirements, but it's still really important. So if men sometimes start taking statin drugs, this can lower the cholesterol too much, and then that will lower your sex hormone production and also anti-inflammatory hormones, so you can get more bone pain or body pain in general. So that's really important. And then obviously just poor diet, too much refined carbohydrates, too much seed oils, which has the effect of raising our insulin. So what's insulin? Insulin is the hormone that controls our blood sugar and is absolutely vital. So insulin works a bit like a lock and a key. So if you think of your cell as the lock and insulin as the key, it opens up the lock so the glucose can go into the cell, so the body utilizes the glucose efficiently in the body. But if you keep hammering up insulin all the time by just eating way too much or being too stressed even, that can raise insulin, then this lock and key mechanism just doesn't work anymore or works less efficiently, and we call that insulin resistance. So really, really important, because that plays into all of the hormones. And then when the insulin and the stress hormone cortisol become really imbalanced, then in men this can also have the impact of lowering our testosterone, or men's testosterone. So again, that has huge implications to, and we're going to discuss all of the symptoms of low testosterone a bit later. But key nutritional elements to make sure testosterone remains in good order is obviously good protein, enough amino acids, good levels of zinc, good levels of vitamin D, because that is a pre-hormone, we now know. It's not just a vitamin. And selenium, but generally a good ratio of all of the vitamins and minerals, because they make up all the cells of the body. So if the cells are not adequate, then the cells make up the glands that then produce the hormones. So it's an indirect effect, not a sort of a direct effect. So poor diet can then lead on to thyroid problems, and men don't necessarily always think of thyroid. It's usually something women think about because they're thinking about the metabolism and losing weight and all the rest of it. But Yeah, but thyroid can also affect men too. And if men are drinking quite substantial quantities of alcohol, again, they're just eating too much refined carbohydrates. All of this, the hormone is actually synthesized in the liver. So the thyroid hormone is converted in the liver. So if you have liver imbalance just because you're not eating correctly, your lifestyle's not good, then you're not going to get enough of that conversion of the thyroid hormone. Affect your metabolism, you can then put weight on, and it goes on and on and on. And also, what can happen in the liver is you get something called too much sex hormone binding globulin. And what that does is, even if you're producing enough testosterone, that is not going to be freely available to you or to a male, because that sex hormone binding globule is going to kind of like, simply put, suck up the testosterone. So it's not going to be available in the cells. And that is why the liver is such an important organ to keep healthy. So we then go on to the effect of pharmaceutical medications. And this can, again, play a huge effect on the way hormones are transcripted in the body. So lots of pharmaceuticals, statins, beta blockers, not just pharmaceuticals, omega-3, if you take too much of it, can affect the conversion of hormones. And we call that, there's something called the HPA axis, which is where the brain talks to the adrenal glands, and the HPG axis in a man, which is where the hypothalamus, the H, the brain, talks to the gonads. So it's all very,
Yeah.
it's all very, so what can happen when we take too much pharmaceutical drugs is that HPA or HPG axis doesn't work efficiently. So if you're taking opioids and painkillers and Tylenol, and and a lot of people take these medications on a regular basis, and then they don't realize that that's actually going to have a huge effect long term on your hormones. So really pay attention to the drugs that you take. And then stress, of course, everybody goes on about that, but people don't think of stress as being both physical and chemical, so your environment and all of the pesticides and every other thing that you're exposed to, and also emotional. So if you're in a stressed out relationship, it's going to lower your testosterone, going to lower your DHEA, which is your precursor to your testosterone, and also lower your progesterone, because men tend to think, well, I think of progesterone as a female hormone, but actually you need progesterone to make testosterone. So we need a little bit of everything. So like we said in our basic video, with all of the hormones, we need not too much, not too little. We need to be nicely somewhere in the middle. So somewhere nice on that bell curve. Lack of sleep hugely plays. Now, if you look at the way men produce their hormones, their hormone production works on much more of what we call a circadian rhythm. So in other words, the 24-hour clock. Now, men generally make nearly all of their testosterone at night. So again, if you're having shift work or you're just lacking sleep, then that testosterone is just not going to get made as efficiently. Women don't work quite so much like that. We work on the 28 days of the cycle. We call that an infradian rhythm. So our hormones work a little bit differently, but men's is definitely 24-hour. So again, lack of sleep, low testosterone, and then the effects of that. And then again, too little exercise, really important. Exercise builds up nitric oxide, which helps keep your arteries open and smooth, and make sure you've just got good circulation, good oxygenation of the body. So again, everything works a bit better. So those are the main things that really impact our hormones in terms of your diet and lifestyle.
So Zoe, can you tell us a bit more about the symptoms of low testosterone, so anyone watching this can be aware of those?
Yeah, the symptoms of low testosterone are actually quite varied and can be quite subtle. So generally speaking, there can just be a slow, particularly in a middle-aged man. So the symptoms in a young man will be probably different than in a middle-aged to an older man. So there's the typical grumpy old man. And this can definitely be due to a low testosterone. So, but it can be a little bit more subtle than that, where suddenly you just don't take pleasure in life anymore. You know, everything becomes a trial. You can be, you know, just like you say, just generally sad or grumpy, or just lose motivation. You lose maybe your enthusiasm at work. So it's not to say, oh, absolutely, this symptom means you have low testosterone, but it's part of what, you know, it's definitely a symptom to look out for.
Okay.
But general, you know, ennui, like, oh, I can't be bothered anymore about life, and, you know, and you've got no motivation to exercise.
So you don't have that get up and go like you would have had actually.
Exactly. So it can be quite subtle. The obvious one is men, obviously we were talking about, produce their testosterone at night. So they naturally should wake up with an erection. If a man doesn't wake up with an erection, and that doesn't mean to say they want to have sex. That's just part of the circadian rhythm that gives men the energy in the morning, and part of that, of course, is sexual energy. Whether that translates into them having sex, it doesn't really matter, but they should naturally wake up with a morning erection. If they don't, then that can definitely be a sign that testosterone has not been produced overnight and is dipping too low. So then that could go into just a generalized low sex drive, not the sex drive that you had. I mean, nobody's expecting a 70-year-old man to have the sex drive as a 20-year-old. So you have to take it in context of age. But nevertheless, there should be a want sometimes. And if there's no sex drive, then that's, you know, that can be due to a low testosterone. Okay. But it can also affect your body mass. So your testosterone can affect the way muscle is built up in the body. So you can start just getting a too lean a body with no muscle, even if you go to the gym and, you know, you're hammering away at the weights or doing resistance training, but it's not actually, your body's not changing. Right. So that can be a real sign of having low testosterone, and just general sort of fatigue, and also poor pain control, because people don't realize that testosterone is also an anti-inflammatory hormone. So it can definitely, you know, you don't recover as well maybe at the gym, you're more sore. So again, might be, if any of those symptoms resonate, then it's worth getting testosterone.
Okay, so diet and lifestyle seem to be key to balancing testosterone production. So what happens if testosterone is low, and how can that be defined, and is there any kind of supplementation that can be taken?
Okay, yeah, let's have a look at what we mean by low testosterone. So most people just pop along to their GP. They will get a serum level of testosterone in the blood, and normal testosterone is classed between about 270 and about 1,700 nanograms per deciliter. So average testosterone, I would say optimal, is around 5 to 800, maybe 6 to 800, something like that. Anything below 300 would be considered low, and men would definitely be symptomatic if testosterone dipped below 300. But having said that, it's a bit like all hormones. Some people are symptomatic even at higher levels. So a bit like thyroid is very, very much like that. You know, some people will have massive thyroid symptoms, but on a blood panel, it looks maybe low normal, you know? So don't ever think, you know, oh my goodness, I've got all these symptoms and there's nothing we can do about it. If it's low normal, then it may be still too low for the individual. So there's a bit of nuance to all of these normal ranges, if you like, when it comes to hormones. In terms of supplementation, a bit like any other hormone, you should only ever supplement if there's a real deficiency. So we looked at all the lifestyle and diet factors that can play into this being low. So if that is the case, then that's what you need to address, and not put a sticking plaster over it and go to an unscrupulous doctor who just gives you testosterone and doesn't look at all of the other factors, including medical factors that we've discussed right at the beginning, that can really play into this. It can be extremely dangerous to supplement testosterone over and above where it's not needed. And then supplementation will obviously depend on the age of the man. If it's a very young man, and let me tell you that people think that low testosterone can just be an aging thing, but there's a very, very interesting nutritional therapist on YouTube, and he became a nutritional therapist because he actually had no erection at the age of 26. And that was because he'd been overdoing it at the gym, working out too much to excess, not eating well, and it took him 2 years to recover his testosterone. And he did it naturally. He didn't do it by taking supplements. So, this is where there's a lot of nuance to it. Obviously, in an older man, then again, you still need to look at the diet and lifestyle factors, but you're not trying to supplement to the stage of a young person. You're just supplementing enough so that you don't get all the medical conditions that can happen from really low testosterone. So the two are different, and you need to go to see a medical specialist and somebody that really looks at that properly and is not just there's the tablet, there's the injection, there's the testosterone, because it's not always the fix. And also, let me just say something about testosterone. A lot of men tend to feel, let's ramp up the testosterone and we're just going to feel sexier and sexier and sexier. And that isn't the case. So within that normal range, you can be just as sexy at if your testosterone is 400 as if it's 1,000, as long as it's within a normal range. And so, wrapping up testosterone is not going to,
it's not the more the better. It obviously has other repercussions and
yes, absolutely. So that is a bit of a myth, and it's something men can get sort of hooked into, thinking that it's something going to make them very sexy, when it actually may not, and it's going to have perhaps very serious other implications if you start taking it. So there's one thing to really remember when you take any supplemental hormone. And men can sometimes in gyms get into this culture of ramping up their testosterone and ramping up growth hormone. So when you take any supplemental hormone, when we discussed this in our basics, our first interview, if you take something exogenously, so you take a tablet or transdermally or whatever, your natural hormone production of the body will lower. And that's because it works on feedback mechanisms. So the body thinks, I've got enough of this, don't need to make it. And that can be quite serious, because it can end up that your natural hormones never recover to what they were before. And then you're on this cycle of having to constantly take hormones, which A, can be dangerous, and B, can be extremely expensive. So it's something that really men need to really understand and take really serious medical advice from people they trust, and not people who are just flogging, cheap testosterone or whatever. And the other thing that is really, really very serious about taking testosterone is it might not end up as testosterone. So the body quite often will, depending on, let's say you're overweight or your insulin is high, your body can quite often convert testosterone to either estrogen, which is a female hormone, which men definitely don't want to be ramping up estrogen, or they convert it to something called dihydrotestosterone, which is it's like testosterone on steroids. So it's an extremely, it's a very concentrated form of testosterone, and that's been implicated with prostate issues, enlargement of the prostate, and hair loss. So, like you say, testosterone is not a panacea, and if you do take it and somebody medically doesn't say to you, I will give you testosterone, but I need to know what you're doing with it. So how you're metabolizing it, because if you're metabolizing it to estrogen, that's a problem. And if you're metabolizing it to too much dihydrotestosterone, that is also a problem. And that can ramp up your cholesterol, it can ramp up your heart risk, it can ramp up insulin, and you're in a mess. So I hope I've really reinforced there how dangerous taking testosterone or anything can be. And the same goes for taking estrogen in women. It's no different.
If you're doing it in a way that's not controlled,
not medically supervised, and somebody who's not checking that you're making sure that you're metabolizing that hormone in the correct way, that's not going to be dangerous to you.
Okay, so the two major hormones, insulin and cortisol. So we talked a little bit about insulin in relation to diet. Can you tell us a little bit more about the stress hormone cortisol and what impact that has on us?
Yeah, sure. So, so this is all to do with our nervous system. And I'm sure most people have heard of the sympathetic, parasympathetic ratios of the nervous system. So sympathetic is our fight and flight response. I mean, it's what we're geared to do. It was what we're geared to do when we were hunting, when we're under stress. We're naturally supposed to produce adrenaline and cortisol. It's what fires us up for action. I mean, these aren't bad hormones. These are totally necessary hormones. And in fact, without cortisol, something called Addison's disease, that is a medical emergency, and without it, you will die. Literally, cortisol is that important. And it's also an anti-inflammatory hormone. So if we go out and we're fighting and we get injured, then cortisol is actually going to stop us from hurting too much. So this initial cortisol is completely vital to our body. So we get cortisol that goes up with this sort of sympathetic dominant state of the nervous system, which is great, but we don't want to be there all the time. We don't want to be in fight and flight mode for 80% of the day, and what we call parasympathetic, so rest and digest, for only 20% of the day, because that's a total imbalance. So what we want to do is we want to ramp up our stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, when we're going to the gym. Make it a good workout, make it a good interview. Like, I'm sure my cortisol and adrenaline were a bit stressed today before this interview, but that's good because it puts me in that state where hopefully I'm going to do a good job. You don't, else I'd be like this, oh, I'm so chilled. What I say. So this is a huge balance. And also alongside that is our response to our fight or flight. So if we're in a fight or flight mode, but we're also feeling angry and anxious, then that's going to ramp that up even more. Whereas if we're, like I was before this interview, I was kind of like a little bit stressed, but I was excited. So that's a totally different feeling. So the response is huge. And it's the same when we're in that sort of parasympathetic, relaxed state where we're producing the feel-good hormones like dopamine and serotonin. But if we're feeling like, you know, relaxed, but also low mood, then that's not good. You know, if we're relaxed and thinking, oh, this is great, I'm relaxed, I can read this book, I can, you know, I can meditate and pray and whatever. So again, our feelings massively play into these fight or flight or rest and digest hormones. So, you know, it's important that we don't overstimulate the sympathetic nervous system, but at the same time, if we're in that sort of relaxed state, which is great because we're digesting and we're repairing our body in that state, but we don't want to be in a low mood at the same time. So, and also the thing to remember is that cortisol, yes, it's great short term, but it's also what we call a catabolic hormone. So it breaks things down. So if you're constantly stressed out and you're going to the gym and you think, oh, I'm doing all this exercise, but look, my muscles I'm not gaining any muscle mass. What a waste of time. That's because the cortisol is breaking everything down to produce sugar and insulin. Right. So it's you know, that can affect people a lot. They overtrain, they over-exercise, they're producing too much of this catabolic hormone and actually destroying the muscle rather than building the muscle up, if that makes sense. So again, that's why we need to make sure we just exercise efficiently, not too long, but in a good way, resistance training, a little bit of cardio, alternate between the two. We don't need to be running marathons, because, you know, if we're running marathons every day or doing too much, then we're actually causing stress and breaking the body down. So yeah, so that's really what I can say about.
So when you say, sorry, when you say it shouldn't really be 80-20, are you talking then 50-50, like literally balanced?
No, I think we should be 20% of the time in a sympathetic stress, you know, in that fight or flight. Because like you say, you've got an interview, you're working hard, you're going to the gym. The rest of the time we need to be relaxed. So we absorb information, or we can meditate or whatever. It's not to say we're going to be asleep during that time, but we need to be in that state where we're relaxed 80% of the time.
Right.
And in that fight, flight, maybe only 20%.
20, okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So can you touch on what other problems can arise? What other health problems we could potentially experience from poor diet and lifestyle choices?
Yeah, I think if you take out a genetic component, if you look at nearly all chronic diseases, somewhere along the line, there'll be a starting point of a hormone imbalance. We know obviously that genetic predisposition to certain diseases can play in, but if you take the genetics and the poor diet and the lack of exercise and other lifestyle issues, that, you know, emotional stress or whatever, then really you're setting your body up for disease. I think that's what you would say. Now, when we look at the genetic component, that's what we call our DNA, and that's like, if you like, the hard drive of our computer. That's what I like to equate it to. And we now know, and everybody used to think, oh, you know, my dad had heart disease, so I'm going to get it. My dad had no hair, so I'm going to get it. We think that we're always going to get the diseases of our forefathers, if you like, because of our genetics. But we now know that through a lot of work on genetics and something called epigenetics, that actually the diet and lifestyle influence our DNA. So over the top of our hardware, we've got our software, and we call that the epigenetics. And that really influences the transcription of the DNA. So even if, like you say, you don't look like you've got a great history in terms of, you know, your mum has had cancer on her side and your dad's had heart disease, or, you know, whatever it is, it doesn't mean to say you're going to get it. If you have good diet and lifestyle, then you can override that DNA. So that's really important. In terms of the sort of disruption, we've talked about diabetes, obviously, you know, really raised insulin. This is type 2 diabetes, by the way. Too much dysregulation of the insulin and the cortisol, and then damaging the liver, maybe through too much alcohol, damages the beta cells of the liver, too much sugar, alcohol, you know, that's the sort of usual, and being overweight. Those are the usual confounding factors for type 2 diabetes, which we all have influence over. So we're in control most of the time as to whether we get type 2 diabetes. And a lot of people think insulin is just about having raised insulin. Well, that's just about diabetes. I don't need to know about that. But that's not true. So they found that people who have raised insulin, you can have raised insulin and be completely not diabetic, not even pre-diabetic. But if you take your insulin after eating 2 and 4 hours, if it's still raised, that's still what they call cardiometabolic risk. So it can increase your risk of heart disease. So it's very important that you eat well and not too much refined carbs, regardless of whether you're diabetic or not, because that will increase your heart attack risk. And that dysregulation, like we said, will also raise your blood pressure, your triglycerides, which is actually your fat in the blood. So your fat in the bloodstream. You'll have poor cholesterol ratios, low HDL cholesterol, high LDL cholesterol, so all of this out of balance potentially. And like we just discussed, poor gut health. So you're not going to have the absorption as well of your essential nutrients, and you will also have more susceptibility to autoimmune conditions, potentially through something called what we call leaky gut syndrome. So whether the gut becomes a bit permeable, and you get, parts of what should be in the intestine going into the bloodstream that then sets up these autoimmune conditions. So, like you say, all of those chronic diseases really can have the starting point as a hormone imbalance.
So I guess a lot of men and women are prone to belly fat in middle age. Can you explain a little bit more about why that happens and what hormones cause that?
Yeah, so again, it's really down to the major three. The insulin in a man anyway. The insulin, the cortisol. So insulin's too high, cortisol's too high, testosterone then can become too low, or too high. So either of those factors can contribute to the propensity to have more belly fat. So, and that's because men, from their testosterone, if those other hormones are dysregulated, can produce more estrogen. And obviously, estrogen happens through, obviously, we call it aromatization of testosterone. We'll discuss that later. But also because they've lived longer and they've had more estrogen disruptors, environmental estrogen disruptors. So they've taken on board more chemicals that have blocked and caused more estrogen. So, and this happens in men and women. So this is why women's, it may be no fault of their own, but they've just lived longer in a polluted and toxic world, and they've become more estrogenic, not necessarily through food, but through these horrible chemicals that are estrogen mimickers, and they disrupt men and women, in some ways more so with men, because men they haven't quite got the system to detoxify estrogen like women have. Women are set up obviously to produce estrogen and to detoxify estrogen. It's one of our major hormones. It's not a major hormone in men. It's an important hormone. Men are still supposed to produce estrogen and progesterone, but not to have all these fake estrogens in the environment that their body has no clue what to deal with. And so it will store it as fat. What the body can't eliminate, the body stores. So yeah, much more of a propensity then to get the belly fat. And of course, like we said with the cortisol, what cortisol tends to do, because it's catabolic, it breaks things down, is you tend to get a body shape where men can have, and women can have, very skinny legs. So they almost lose and atrophy the muscle and the weight from their legs and buttocks, and it all starts to accumulate around the waist. So it's a redistribution of weight as well as weight gain. But it's not healthy, because we don't want to be accumulating waste around the middle. It is a factor for increased risk of cardiometabolic disease in general.
Okay. So what can men do to prevent themselves maybe from becoming so estrogen dominant?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Dee. Well, first of all, just make sure you go to the doctors. They can test these hormones easily. First of all, they can check your glucose just to make sure you're not pre-diabetic. That's a very good thing to get checked regularly and monitor. The second thing is to check your ratio of estrogen to the female hormone estradiol. And again, you want that to be nicely in balance. You don't want too much estrogen in relationship to testosterone. So again, easy check at the doctors. But like you say, as we age and we are more exposed, if you like, to these sort of mimicking estrogens, which we call xenoestrogens. So we can get estrogen from two sources. We actually take estrogen, which men are unlikely to do that. They're not. Although having said that, actually, there is a point that the contraceptive pill has not been able to be eliminated from tap water. So men are potentially, if they're constantly drinking tap water in areas where you can confirm it hasn't been eliminated, which is in most areas I understand, they're getting a daily dose of estrogen through their water supply. You know, it's very scary. Men are not meant to be exposed to estrogen in this way. You know, they produce estrogen from their testes and from their adrenals and progesterone, and that's it. That's the only estrogen they're supposed to get, not from tap water and contraceptives. So this is a concern for men. And then soy products that are non-organic and genetically modified, which is quite a lot of soy products. So soy protein isolates, processed vegetarian foods that contain these sort of, you know, not healthy soy, not fermented soy, but these sort of other types of soy, then this can have a very estrogenic effect on men. So I recommend that men really don't take too much soy in their diet. And then obviously we discussed the endocrine disruptors, so pesticides and chemicals, you know, just your cleaning materials. Just be conscious of how much of it you're spraying around, because these produce estrogen in the body. They latch onto what should be the normal estrogen receptor sites. They stay on there too long and the body can't get rid of them. So again, this is going to cause an imbalance. So what can men do to actually stop this sort of aromatization of their testosterone to estrogen? One of them is to make sure that their blood sugar is in order. So go on a, not necessarily a strictly ketogenic diet. I'm not really massively in favor of those, but a good quality, low-ish carbohydrate diet, but make it good quality carbohydrates. And then they can take broccoli. So all of the brassica vegetables, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, stinging nettle root, kale, they all contain a product which I can't actually, I can't get my tongue around it, but it's basically DIN, D-I-N. It's a natural substance found in all of these vegetables. And if they have massively high estrogen, then they can take DIM as a supplement. But I recommend that men have a daily dose of brassica vegetables in their diet, because this is going to lower these nasty estrogens. And then just, you know, make sure you're detoxifying the liver well, because this is where the hormones get stored. So something like milk thistle, perhaps, to help detoxify the liver. Just make sure you're not consuming too much alcohol. You know, just general good diet practice, basically. And exercise, because that gets rid of the unnecessary hormones too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us again, Zoe. For part 3, we'll be talking about hair loss and sex drive in relation to male hormones. Don't forget to hit like or subscribe below, and we'll see you next time.